They say information is the most valuable currency in the world, but in a city like New York, it can also get you killed. Aurora was just a waitress, invisible to the powerful men she served every night. But when she overheard a betrayal that would cost a tech mogul billions, she had a choice: stay silent and stay safe, or whisper a warning and risk everything. She chose to speak. She expected to be fired. She expected to be threatened. What she didn't expect was a convoy of luxury SUVs blocking her street the next morning. And the man inside wasn't there to say thank you. He was there to make a deal. This is the story of how one honest mistake changed everything. The sound of Le Ciel was distinct. It wasn't the clatter of silverware or the murmur of conversation found in normal restaurants. Here, in the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive dining room, the sound was the soft, muffled chime of crystal flutes touching and the scratch of fountain pens signing away millions. Aurora Rostova adjusted her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't from the weight of the tray. She had been carrying heavier burdens since her father's heart attack forced her to drop out of her MBA program 3 years ago. It was the exhaustion. Double shifts for 6 months straight were starting to blur the lines between days and nights. Table 4 needs a refill on the Pinot Noir. The 1992 vintage, the floor manager, a sharp-featured man named Gustave, snapped as he walked past her. And do not hover, Aurora. The gentleman in the gray suit is Julian Thorne. If you spill a drop, don't bother coming back tomorrow. Aurora nodded, taking the decanter. She didn't need the introduction. Everyone knew Julian Thorne. He was the wonderkind of the tech world, the CEO of Thorne Dynamics, and the man currently revolutionizing renewable energy. He was 32, sharply handsome, and notoriously cold. Sitting across from him was a man Aurora recognized only from the tabloids, Marcus Sterling, Julian's best friend, his college roommate, and his CFO. They were the golden duo of Wall Street. Aurora approached the table with the practiced invisibility of high-end service. She was a ghost in a uniform. "The merger has to happen on Friday, Julian," Marcus was saying, his voice low but urgent. He leaned in, his smile tight. "The board is skittish. If we delay Project Helios any longer, the stock dips. I've already vetted the holding company in Zurich. They're clean." Aurora poured the wine into Julian's glass. Her hand was steady, but her mind snagged on the word Zurich. Julian took a sip, his eyes scanning a document on the table. He looked tired. "I don't like being rushed, Marcus. Something feels off about the valuation. Why are they offering 20% above market price for the logistics division?" "Because they want your tech, Jules. They're desperate." Marcus laughed, clapping Julian on the shoulder. "Trust me, I've been over the books. It's the deal of the century. You sign this, and Thorne Dynamics becomes untouchable." Julian sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine, I'll have legal draw it up in the morning." "Actually," Marcus slid a thick folder across the white tablecloth. "I had legal prep the preliminary transfer. Just initial here, and I can lock in the rate before the Asian markets open. It saves us about $12 million in taxes." Aurora finished pouring Marcus's glass. As she stepped back, her eyes caught the reflection of Marcus's phone, sitting face up on the table next to his fork. A text message flashed on the screen. Sender, V. Krovos. Message, "Is it done? The shell company dissolves in 24 hours. If he doesn't sign, the debt is yours, Marcus." Aurora froze. The breath trapped in her throat. She knew the name Krovos. Everyone in the finance department of her old university knew it. Victor Krovos wasn't a businessman. He was a corporate raider, a man who bought companies through shell corporations, stripped them of their assets, and left the carcasses to rot. If the holding company was connected to Krovos, and the shell company was dissolving in 24 hours, this wasn't a merger, it was a liquidation. Marcus was selling Julian out. He was handing over the logistics division, the heart of Julian's company, to a shark, likely to cover his own gambling debts or bad investments. "Aurora," Gustave's voice hissed in her earpiece, "why are you standing there? Move!" She blinked, snapping back to reality. Julian was reaching for his gold fountain pen. The tip hovered over the paper. If she spoke, she would be fired. A waitress interrupting a billion-dollar deal? It was professional suicide. She would be blacklisted from every high-end venue in the city. She needed this job. Her father's medication cost more than her rent. But she looked at Julian Thorne. He looked exhausted, trusting the man sitting across from him implicitly. He had no idea the knife was already at his throat. "Do it," her conscience screamed. "Do it and run." Aurora stepped forward again, reaching for the water pitcher this time. It was a breach of protocol to return so quickly, but she had to be close. "More water, sir?" she asked softly. Marcus waved her away dismissively without looking up. "No, we're fine." Julian didn't look up either. His eyes were fixed on the signature line. The pen touched the paper. Aurora's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She moved to Julian's side, ostensibly to adjust the placement of the breadbasket. As she leaned in, occupying the space between the two men, she saw Marcus look away to signal the sommelier for the check. It was her only chance. She kept her face neutral, her eyes downcast, but she pitched her voice so that only Julian could hear it. A harsh, rapid whisper near his ear. The text on his phone, Aurora breathed. "Krovos, Shell Company dissolves in 24 hours. Don't sign." She pulled back instantly, her face flushing hot. Julian froze. The tip of his pen left a small ink blot on the paper, but he didn't write his name. His hand stopped completely. For 3 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. The restaurant noise seemed to fade into a high-pitched ring in Aurora's ears. Slowly, Julian raised his head. He didn't look at Aurora. He looked at Marcus. "Is something wrong, Jules?" Marcus asked, his smile faltering slightly. "Ink dry?" Julian stared at his friend. The exhaustion in his eyes was replaced by something sharp, cold, and terrifyingly intelligent. He capped the pen with a loud click. "No," Julian said, his voice level. "I just remembered something. I need to have my personal legal team, not the company lawyers, review the Zurich connection one last time." Marcus's face went pale. "Jules, come on. The window closes tonight. We talked about this." "And now we're done talking about it," Julian said. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He grabbed the folder. "I'm taking this with me. If everything is as clean as you say, Marcus, a 12-hour delay won't hurt." He turned to leave. As he pivoted, his steel-gray eyes locked onto Aurora's for a fraction of a second. There was no gratitude in them. Just a piercing, analyzing scrutiny, as if he were dissecting her soul. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just turned and walked out. Marcus sat at the table, stunned. His hands were clenched into fists on the white tablecloth. He snatched up his phone, reading the message again, then looked up at Aurora. His eyes narrowed. He realized. "You!" Marcus snarled, standing up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. "What did you say to him?" "I asked if he wanted sparkling or still, sir," Aurora lied, her voice trembling. "You lying little rat," Marcus hissed. He threw his napkin down. "Gustav!" The manager was there in seconds, looking terrified at the VIP's anger. "Mr. Sterling, is everything all right?" "This girl," Marcus pointed a shaking finger at Aurora. "She's incompetent. She spilled water on me and then tried to solicit a tip. Get her out of my sight. And tell Julian I'll meet him at the office." Marcus stormed out, leaving a wake of silence. Gustav turned to Aurora, his face purple with rage. "Get out!" "Mr. Gustav, I didn't." "I don't care. You upset Marcus Sterling. You think you can work in this town after that. Pack your locker. You're done." Aurora untied her apron, her hands shaking so hard she could barely undo the knot. She had done the right thing. She had saved Julian Thorne from a disaster. And her reward was unemployment. The walk home was brutal. It was raining, a cold, miserable New York drizzle that soaked through her thin coat. Aurora lived in Queens, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the sirens never stopped. When she walked into her small apartment, the smell of antiseptic hit her. Her father, Leo, was asleep in the recliner, an oxygen tube in his nose. The pile of bills on the kitchen counter seemed to have grown since she left that morning. She sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. Why did I do it? She asked herself. Julian Thorne doesn't care about me. He's a billionaire. He would have survived a bad deal. But I won't survive this. She checked her bank account on her phone. $142. Rent was due in 3 days. She didn't sleep that night. She spent the hours pacing the small living room, updating her resume, and applying for jobs at diners that paid half of what Lucielle did. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky a bruised purple, she felt hollow. At 7 a.m., she was making coffee, trying to figure out how to tell her father she had lost the job that paid for his treatments. Then, the noise started. It began as a low rumble, vibrating the windows of the old apartment building. It grew louder, a deep, powerful purr of engines that didn't belong on this street. Aurora walked to the window and pulled back the tattered curtain. Her eyes widened. Down on the street, sandwiched between a rusted sedan and a dumpster, were 3 cars. Not just cars. They were armored black SUVs with tinted windows, flanking a pristine, midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom. The neighborhood was waking up. People were leaning out of their windows. Kids were running onto the sidewalk. This was a neighborhood where the police only came in force, and rich people never came at all. Aurora watched as the driver of the Rolls-Royce stepped out. He was a giant of a man, dressed in a suit that cost more than Aurora's entire building. He checked a tablet, looked up at the building numbers, and then walked straight toward her front door. A heavy knock echoed through the apartment. Leo stirred in his chair. "Aurora, who is that?" I don't know, Papa," she whispered, though a cold dread was pooling in her stomach. Had Marcus sent them? Was this retaliation? Did wealthy men send hitmen in Rolls-Royces? She walked to the door, her heart pounding against her ribs. She unlocked the deadbolt and opened it 2 inches, keeping the chain on. The large man stood in the hallway. He filled the entire frame. He looked down at her through the crack. "Aurora Rostova?" he asked. His voice was deep, gravelly but polite. "Yes?" "My name is Silas. I work for Julian Thorne." Aurora gripped the door handle. "If this is about what happened at the restaurant, Mr. Sterling got me fired. I didn't mean to." "Mr. Thorne is downstairs," Silas interrupted, his expression unreadable. "He requests your presence. Immediately." He's here?" "In the car. He said to tell you that the Zurich connection was indeed interesting." Silas paused, and for the first time a small smile touched his lips. "And he suggests you dress for a board meeting, not a shift." Aurora stood frozen. "Miss Rostova? Give me 5 minutes," she stammered. She closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. This wasn't a hit. But it wasn't a thank you card either. Julian Thorne was outside, in the ghetto, waiting for her. She ran to her closet. She didn't have business suits. She had waitressing uniforms and worn-out jeans. She found the one blazer she had kept from her business school days, a navy blue jacket that was slightly tight in the shoulders now, and a clean white blouse. She pulled her hair back into a severe bun. "Papa, I have to go out," she called out, grabbing her purse. "I'll be back soon." "Is everything okay, Lena?" her father asked, confused. "I think so," she said, though she wasn't sure. "I think the world just turned upside down." She walked down the stairs, her heels clicking on the linoleum. When she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the crowd fell silent. The neighbors stared at her. The girl who usually walked to the subway in a stained apron was now being ushered toward a $500,000 car. Silas opened the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Aurora took a breath of the cool morning air and slid inside. The interior smelled of leather and expensive espresso. Julian Thorne was sitting there, tapping on a tablet. He didn't look up immediately. The car was silent, insulated from the noise of the street outside. "Drive," Julian said to the front. As the car pulled away, gliding over the potholes as if they didn't exist, Julian finally turned to look at her. He looked different than he had the night before. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a terrifying intensity. "You speak Italian," he stated. It wasn't a question. "A little," Aurora replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My grandmother was from Milan." "And you have a background in finance." 3 years at NYU before you dropped out. Top 5% of your class." Aurora blinked. "How do you know that?" "I know everything about the people who saved my company, Miss Rostova," Julian said, closing his tablet. He reached into the seat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto her lap. "What is this?" "Severance from LaCiel," Julian said dryly, "and in advance. We have a meeting at Thorne Dynamics in 30 minutes. Marcus is going to attempt to push the vote through the board without my signature, claiming I'm mentally unfit. He's citing erratic behavior at dinner last night." Aurora gasped. "He's trying to steal the company today?" "He's trying," Julian corrected, his eyes cold as ice, "but he doesn't know that I have a witness. He thinks you're just a waitress. He got fired. He has no idea you understand the intricacies of shell corporations." Julian leaned forward. "I don't need you to serve coffee today, Aurora. I need you to walk into that boardroom, look Marcus Sterling in the eye, and repeat exactly what you told me last night. Can you do that?" Aurora looked at the envelope in her lap, then up at the man who held her future in his hands. This was it, the moment she could stop being invisible. "I can," she said firmly. "Good." Julian sat back. "Because after today, Marcus isn't just going to lose his job. He's going to prison. And you, Miss Rostova, are going to get your life back." The car sped up, merging onto the highway toward the gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan. The drama was just beginning. The headquarters of Thorne Dynamics was a 70-story monolith of glass and steel piercing the Manhattan skyline. To the tourists below, it was just another skyscraper. To Wall Street, it was the fortress where the future of renewable energy was being written. To Aurora, standing on the sidewalk in her scuffed heels and slightly ill-fitting blazer, it looked like a guillotine. The Rolls-Royce glided to a halt at the private executive entrance. Silas, the giant driver, opened the door. "Head up, Miss Rostova," Silas murmured as she stepped out. "Fear is blood in the water here." Aurora nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She fell into step beside Julian. The transformation in him was terrifying. In the restaurant, he had been the relaxed, tired genius. Now, he was a predator. His stride was long and purposeful, his jaw set in a line of granite. He didn't look at the security guards who scrambled to open the doors. He expected the doors to be open. They swept into the private elevator. Julian pressed the button for the 70th floor. The boardroom. As the numbers on the display climbed, the silence stretched. Aurora smoothed the front of her skirt, her palms sweating. "You're nervous," Julian said, not looking at her. He was checking his watch. "I'm about to accuse the CFO of a billion-dollar company of treason," Aurora replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "I think nervous is appropriate." Julian turned to her. For a moment, the icy facade cracked. "Marcus and I built this company in a garage in Palo Alto. We ate ramen for 3 years. I trusted him with my life. If you are wrong, Aurora, I will look like a paranoid fool, and my stock will tank." "I saw the name Krovos," Aurora said, meeting his gaze, "and I saw the fear in his eyes when you didn't sign. I'm not wrong." Julian studied her face. "No, I don't think you are. But be warned, Marcus is charming. He is a manipulator. He will try to humiliate you. He will try to make you look small. Do not let him." The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. They didn't step into a hallway. They stepped directly into the ante-room of the boardroom. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. A frantic administrative assistant, a young woman named Sarah with terrified eyes, jumped up from her desk. "Mr. Thorne, you! We weren't expecting you." "Mr. Sterling said you were unwell." "Did he?" Julian's voice was smooth, dangerous silk. "Is the board in session?" "Yes, sir. They started 10 minutes ago. Mr. Sterling is calling for an emergency vote on the merger." "Open the door." "Sir, he gave strict instructions." "Open the door." Sarah scrambled to the heavy oak double doors and pushed them open. Julian didn't wait. He strode through, and Aurora, taking a deep breath that felt like inhaling broken glass, followed him into the lion's den. The boardroom was massive. A 40-foot table made of reclaimed mahogany dominated the space. Around it sat 12 of the most powerful people in finance, men and women in bespoke suits, with faces that could curdle milk. At the head of the table stood Marcus Sterling. He was mid-sentence, his hands raised in a gesture of helpless concern. It breaks my heart to say it, truly, but Julian's behavior last night at Le Ciel was erratic. Paranoid. He's under immense pressure, and I believe he is suffering from a breakdown. For the safety of the company, we must finalize the Zurich deal before the market loses confidence in his leadership. I ask for a vote of no confidence in Julian Thorne as CEO, effective immediately. I didn't realize I was having a breakdown, Marcus. Julian's voice boomed across the room. I thought I was just having dinner. The room went dead silent. 12 heads snapped toward the door. Marcus froze. His charming, concerned mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing pure, unadulterated panic before he plastered a smile back onto his face. "Julian!" Marcus exclaimed, opening his arms as if to hug a brother. "Thank God! We were so worried. Sarah said you hadn't come in. I was just telling the board that the stress might be getting to you." "I heard what you were telling the board," Julian said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. He didn't take the empty seat. He stood right next to Marcus, looming over him. "You were trying to sell my company to a liquidation firm." A ripple of murmurs went through the board members. "Liquidation?" An older woman with silver hair and sharp glasses spoke up. It was Victoria Vance, a notorious venture capitalist. "Marcus, the prospectus says the Zurich Group is a tech holding firm." "It is." Marcus laughed nervously, adjusting his tie. "Julian is confused. See, this is what I'm talking about. Paranoia. He sees enemies everywhere." Marcus's eyes darted to Aurora, standing by the door. His lip curled in a sneer. "And who is this? Did you bring a groupie to a board meeting, Julian? This is highly irregular." Julian turned to face the room. He gestured to Aurora. "This is the witness to your treason, Marcus. Come here, Aurora." Aurora's legs felt like lead, but she forced them to move. She walked past the staring billionaires, past the judgmental eyes, until she stood beside Julian. She felt small, cheap, and out of place. But then she looked at Marcus. She saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. He was afraid. And that gave her power. "Tell them," Julian commanded. "Last night." Aurora's voice quavered, then strengthened. "I was serving Mr. Thorne and Mr. Sterling at Le Ciel. Mr. Sterling was pressuring Mr. Thorne to sign a transfer agreement for the logistics division. While Mr. Thorne was reading the document, Mr. Sterling received a text message. "This is ridiculous," Marcus scoffed, looking at the board. "She's a waitress." "A fired waitress, I might add. I fired her for incompetence." "Let her speak," Victoria Vance said sharply. Aurora took a breath. The text was from a sender named V. Krovos. It read, "Is it done? The shell company dissolves in 24 hours. If he doesn't sign, the debt is yours, Marcus." The silence that followed was heavy. The name, Krovos, sucked the air out of the room. "Victor Krovos," a board member whispered. "The butcher of Belgrade? He's sanctioned by the SEC and the EU." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. You're going to take the word of a disgruntled servant over your CFO? I've never met Victor Krovos in my life. This woman is obviously paid by Julian to stall the deal because he's got cold feet." Marcus turned on Aurora, his eyes full of venom. "How much is he paying you, honey? Did he promise to buy you a new purse? You think you can walk in here with your bargain bin shoes and slander me?" Aurora felt the sting of tears, but she bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron. "I saw what I saw." "You saw nothing!" Marcus shouted, losing his cool. "You're a liar. I was texting my wife about dinner." "Then show us the phone," Julian said quietly. The room went still again. "What?" Marcus blinked. "Show us the phone," Julian repeated, holding out his hand. "If you were texting your wife, the log will be there. If you deleted it, the forensic data team I have waiting in the lobby can recover it in 5 minutes." Marcus clutched his phone in his pocket. He looked around the table. The board members were no longer looking at him with sympathy. They were looking at him with suspicion. "This is a violation of my privacy," Marcus spat. "I am the CFO of this company. I will not be treated like a criminal based on the word of a waitress." "You're right," Julian said. "We shouldn't rely on just her word." Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. He tossed it onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Victoria Vance. "Part of the security protocols I installed last year," Julian said, his voice cold. "I mirror all executive communications through the company server for compliance. I didn't check the logs because I trusted you, Marcus. But after Aurora warned me last night, I had my security team pull your data." Julian leaned in close to Marcus's face. "You didn't just text Krovos. You've been emailing him for 6 months. You lost $40 million on crypto futures, didn't you, Marcus? And Krovos bought your debt in exchange for my company." Marcus's face drained of all color. He looked like a corpse standing upright. For a moment, it seemed like Marcus would collapse. But then, a strange thing happened. The fear vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold, ugly sneer. He straightened his jacket and looked around the room, not with shame, but with defiance. "So what?" Marcus said. The casual tone was more shocking than a scream. "So what?" Julian repeated, incredulous. "You committed corporate espionage, fraud, embezzlement." "I did what I had to do to survive," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You sit there, Julian, with your billions, playing the saint. You don't know what it's like to lose. I made a bad bet. I fixed it. By destroying everything we built? By selling a piece of it," Marcus snapped. "You wouldn't even have noticed the logistics division was gone. You're too busy playing with your new solar toys." Marcus turned to the board. "And don't look at me like that. Half of you have accounts in the Caymans that would make the IRS weep. I made a deal. It's business." "It's prison," Victoria Vance said, standing up. "I'm calling the authorities." "Sit down, Victoria," Marcus barked. Suddenly, the doors to the boardroom burst open again. But it wasn't the police. 4 men in dark suits entered. They weren't security. They moved with a military precision that screamed. Private contractors. And behind them walked a man who made the billionaires in the room look like children. He was short, balding, and wore a suit that looked rumpled. But the way he walked, slow, heavy, inevitable, silenced the room. "Mr. Krovos," Marcus breathed, relief washing over his face. "Thank God. Tell them the deal is legitimate." Aurora stepped back, her heart hammering. "Victor Krovos, the man from the text. He was here? In the building?" Julian didn't move, but his muscles coiled tight. "How did you get past security?" Krovos ignored Julian. He walked to the head of the table, pulled out the chair Marcus had been standing next to, and sat down. He placed a heavy cane on the table. "Your security is excellent, Mr. Thorne," Krovos said, his voice thick with an Eastern European accent. "But everyone has a price. Your head of security has a gambling problem, much like your friend Marcus here." Krovos looked at Marcus. "You failed, Marcus." "No," Marcus stammered. "No, I didn't. We can still force the vote. I have proxies, if we just—" "The deal was for the company to be transferred yesterday," Krovos said calmly. "It is today. The market has opened. The opportunity is gone." Krovos turned his heavy-lidded eyes toward Julian. "Mr. Thorne, I admire your technology. I wanted to buy it cheap. Marcus promised me a fire sale. It seems he promised what he could not deliver." "Get out of my building," Julian said. "I am leaving," Krovos said, standing up. "I do not do business with failures," he gestured to his men, "and I collect my debts." 2 of the contractors stepped forward and grabbed Marcus by the arms. "Wait!" Marcus shrieked, struggling. "Victor, wait! I can fix this! Julian, help me! Don't let them take me!" Julian stood still. He looked at the man who had been his best friend for 10 years. The man who had looked him in the eye and tried to stab him in the back. "You made a deal with the devil, Marcus," Julian said softly. I can't break that contract. Julian! Please! They'll kill me! Marcus screamed as he was dragged toward the door. His heels skidded on the expensive carpet. Aurora! Tell him I didn't mean it. Aurora looked away. She felt sick, but she knew this was the karma he had earned. The room was silent as Marcus's screams faded down the hallway. Krovos paused at the door. He looked at Aurora. You, Krovos said. The waitress. Aurora met his gaze, trembling but standing her ground. You have sharp ears, Krovos said. In my line of work, that is rare. If you ever tire of serving pasta, call me. He threw a business card onto the floor and walked out. The boardroom was dead quiet. The air conditioning hummed. Victoria Vance let out a long breath. Well, that complicates the quarterly report. Julian sagged, bracing his hands on the table. He looked 10 years older. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the grief of betrayal. He looked up and found Aurora. She was standing by the window, looking at the city below. She looked ready to bolt. Aurora, Julian said. She turned. I should go. I did what you asked. You did, Julian said. He walked over to her, ignoring the questions being shouted by the board members. He stood in front of her, shielding her from the chaos. You saved this company, he said, but more importantly, you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I just didn't like the way he treated you, Aurora whispered. Friends don't do that. No, Julian said intensely, they don't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. Silas, bring the car around, we're leaving. Leaving? Aurora asked. But the board, the company. The board can handle the cleanup, Julian said, taking her elbow gently. I have a debt to pay. And I never leave a debt unpaid. The silence in the Rolls-Royce was different this time. On the way to the tower, it had been filled with tension and adrenaline. Now, as the car navigated the midday traffic of Manhattan, the silence was heavy with exhaustion and unspoken questions. Julian sat with his head back against the leather seat, his eyes closed. He looked like a man who had just walked away from a car crash, uninjured, but shaken to his core. Where to, Miss Rostova? Silas asked from the front, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. There was a new respect in the driver's gaze. Queens, Aurora said softly. The apartment. No, Julian said. He didn't open his eyes. Not the apartment. You mentioned your father earlier. You said you were taking care of him. Is he at home? Aurora hesitated. Yes, he's on home oxygen, but I need to get back. The nurse leaves at noon, and I can't afford the overtime. Julian opened his eyes. The steel-gray hardness was gone, replaced by a genuine, pained curiosity. You saved me from losing $1 billion company, and you're worried about paying a nurse for an hour of overtime? That's my reality, Mr. Thorne, Aurora said, lifting her chin slightly. We don't all have millions to gamble on crypto. Julian flinched. Fair point. He tapped the intercom. Silas, change of plans. Take us to Queens. But call Dr. Aris on the way. Tell him to meet us there. Dr. Aris? Aurora asked, alarmed. Who is that? The best cardiologist in the state, Julian said. If your father is sick, he shouldn't be in an apartment in Queens. He should be at Mount Sinai. I can't afford Mount Sinai, Aurora said, her voice rising. I can't even afford my rent next week because I got fired last night, remember? I remember, Julian said softly. He turned on the seat to face her fully. Aurora, do you understand what happened back there? Marcus wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing my life's work. Project Helios isn't just a business to me. It's the legacy I'm leaving for my children, if I ever have them. You saved that. I did what was right, she insisted. And now I'm going to do what is right. The car ride to Queens felt impossibly short. When the massive vehicle pulled up to her crumbling apartment building again, the contrast was even starker in the bright midday sun. The garbage cans were overflowing. A group of teenagers on the corner stopped talking to stare at the car. Julian stepped out, ignoring the stares. He walked with Aurora into the building. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. Julian didn't wrinkle his nose. He just looked angry. Angry that she had to live here. When they entered the apartment, Leo was awake, coughing weakly in his chair. The oxygen tank hummed rhythmically. "Aurora?" Leo wheezed, his eyes widening as he saw the man in the bespoke suit standing in their tiny kitchen. "Who?" "Papa, this is Julian Thorne," Aurora said, rushing to his side to adjust his cannula. Julian walked over. He didn't hover awkwardly. He knelt down beside the chair, bringing himself to Leo's eye level. He took the old man's frail hand. "Mr. Rostova," Julian said gently, "your daughter did me a great service today. She is a woman of exceptional character and intelligence." Leo looked confused but proud. She is a good girl. Smart. Too smart to be a waitress." "I agree," Julian said. He stood up as a knock came at the door. It was Dr. Eris, looking out of breath, followed by 2 EMTs carrying a specialized transport gurney. "Mr. Thorne?" Dr. Eris asked. "Assess him," Julian commanded. "And then get him to the VIP wing at Mount Sinai. I want him on the best treatment plan available by tonight." "Wait!" Aurora grabbed Julian's arm. "I can't accept this. This is charity." Julian looked at her hand on his arm, then up into her eyes. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. "It is not charity, Aurora. It's a signing bonus." Aurora blinked. What?" "You have a degree in finance, incomplete or not. You speak Italian. You understand corporate maneuvering better than my board of directors. And most importantly, you are the only person in this city who told me the truth when it cost you everything." Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen, the same one he had almost used to sign his company away the night before. He took a napkin from the kitchen table and scribbled a number on it. "This is the salary for my new chief of staff. It comes with a corporate apartment in the Upper East Side, a company car, and full medical benefits for immediate family." Aurora looked at the napkin. The number was staggering. It was more than she would make in 10 years at the restaurant. "Chief of staff," she whispered. "I'm just a waitress." "No," Julian said, stepping closer. The space between them crackled with electricity. "You were never just a waitress. You were just waiting for the right opportunity. Be my eyes, Aurora. Watch my back. I can't do this alone anymore." Aurora looked at her father, who was already being gently lifted onto the gurney by the EMTs. For the first time in years, he didn't look in pain. He looked safe. She looked back at Julian. "I start tomorrow," she said. Julian smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "You start today. Let's get out of here." The lunch rush at Le Ciel was a chaotic symphony of clattering silverware and demanding voices. Gustave, the floor manager who had sneered at Aurora just 14 days ago, was currently purple in the face. The restaurant was understaffed, the kitchen was backed up, and the VIPs were getting impatient. "Table 6 has been waiting 10 minutes for their sparkling water." Gustave screamed at a new waitress, a young, trembling girl named Sophie, who looked like she was on the verge of tears. "What is wrong with you? Are you incompetent? Do you want to end up on the street like that useless Rostova girl?" Sophie flinched, clutching the water pitcher to her chest. "I'm sorry, sir. My hands are shaking. I don't care about your hands. I care about my reputation," Gustave hissed, grabbing her arm roughly. "Get out there, or don't bother coming back after your shift." Sophie scrambled away, wiping a tear from her cheek. Gustave smoothed his jacket, muttering curses about peasant labor, and turned to greet a new party entering the foyer. "Welcome to Le Ciel. How many for?" Gustave's voice died in his throat. The reservation book slipped from his sweaty fingers and hit the podium with a dull thud. The restaurant, usually filled with the low hum of deal-making and gossip, fell into a stunned silence. It started at the front tables and rippled backward like a wave until the entire dining room was quiet. Walking through the heavy glass doors was a vision of absolute power. It was Aurora. But it wasn't the Aurora who had worn a stained apron and orthopedic shoes. This woman was wearing a custom-tailored cream pantsuit that screamed Italian design. Her hair, once pulled back in a messy bun, cascaded in glossy, expensive waves over her shoulders. She wore oversized dark sunglasses, which she slowly removed with a manicured hand, revealing eyes that scanned the room with a cool, detached amusement. She didn't look like a server, she looked like she owned the city. Walking a step behind her, like a loyal guard dog in a $5,000 suit, was Julian Thorne. He looked relaxed, his hands in his pockets, a small smirk playing on his lips as he watched the room react to her. Behind him stood two hulking security guards from Thorne Dynamics. Gustav's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He stumbled forward, his arrogant demeanor instantly replaced by a terrified, oily sycophancy. Miss Rostova?" Gustav stammered, his eyes darting between her and the billionaire behind her. "And Mr. Thorne, what an unexpected honor! We didn't have a reservation on the books, but for you, I can clear the distinct table by the window immediately. I will move the senator myself." Aurora didn't move toward the table. She stood perfectly still in the center of the foyer, forcing Gustav to come to her. She looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. "We're not here to eat, Gustav," Aurora said. Her voice was calm, velvety, but it carried a steel edge that echoed across the silent room. "Oh!" Gustav wrung his hands together, sweating profusely. "Then, surely you are here to visit old friends? We have missed you so much, Aurora. The team has been lost without you." Julian let out a short, dark laugh from behind her. "I doubt that," Aurora said dryly. She walked past Gustav, ignoring him completely, and headed straight for the service station. The other waiters froze, pressing themselves against the walls to let her pass. Aurora stopped in front of Sophie, the crying new girl. "You," Aurora said gently. "Sophie, right?" Yes, ma'am," Sophie whispered, terrified. "I saw him grab your arm," Aurora said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Does he do that often?" Sophie looked at Gustav, then back at the floor, nodding tearfully. Aurora turned slowly on her heel to face the manager. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Thorne has been looking for a new investment," Aurora announced, her voice projecting to the back of the room so every diner, waiter, and busboy could hear. "He enjoys the food here, but he found the management lacking." "Lacking?" Gustav squeaked. "I have run this establishment for 20 years. I am an institution." "You are a liability," Julian interjected, stepping up beside Aurora. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the nearest table. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, Thorne Dynamics has acquired the Le Ciel restaurant group. We own the building, the brand, and the kitchen sink." Gustav turned pale as a sheet. "You bought the restaurant?" "Actually," Julian corrected, pointing at Aurora, "she did. I just signed the check. Aurora is the new acting director of hospitality for the holding company." Aurora took a step toward Gustav. He actually took a step back, cowering. "Gustav," Aurora said, savoring the moment, "you fired me for being honest. You belittled me for being poor, and you abuse your staff because it makes you feel big." She pointed to the door. "You're fired, effective immediately, and don't bother with your locker. Security will mail you your things." You can't do this!" Gustav shrieked, his dignity completely gone. "I know people. I will sue." "Escort him out," Aurora said to the security guards bored. The two large men stepped forward. One took Gustav by the left arm, the other by the right. They didn't drag him, but they marched him out quickly. Gustav's protests of, "I am Le Ciel," faded as the doors swung shut behind him. For a second there was total silence. Then the kitchen staff started clapping. The waiters joined in. Even a few of the regular diners, who had secretly hated Gustav's arrogance for years, began to applaud. Aurora held up a hand. The room quieted. She turned to Sophie. "Sophie, you're the new floor manager. Wipe your eyes. You have a team to lead." Sophie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Me? But I'm new." "You're kind," Aurora said. "That's more important. Everyone else, back to work. We have a dinner service to prep for." As the restaurant sprang back to life with a renewed, lighter energy, Aurora turned to Julian. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just gratitude, it was awe. "You enjoy that?" he asked quietly. "A little too much," she admitted, a flush of adrenaline on her cheeks. "Was it too harsh?" "It was perfect," Julian said. "Now, let's get out of here. I have one last thing to show you before the board meeting." They walked out into the bright Manhattan afternoon. The air felt cleaner, fresher. Parked directly in front of the entrance, in the no-parking zone that Gustave used to reserve for diplomats, sat a machine that looked less like a car and more like a spaceship. It was an Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, painted a pearlescent white that shimmered in the sun. The interior was deep red leather. A large red bow sat on the hood. Aurora stopped dead on the sidewalk. "Julian, whose car is that?" "Yours," Julian said simply. He dangled the crystal key fob in front of her. "Mine?" Aurora laughed nervously. "Julian, the job, the medical bills for my dad, that was enough. I can't accept a $300,000 car." "It's a company vehicle," Julian said with a shrug, though his eyes were warm. "My chief of staff cannot be seen taking the subway. It reflects poorly on the brand." He pressed the key into her palm. His fingers lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Besides," he lowered his voice, leaning in close so only she could hear, "you saved me from a crash. It's only fair I give you something that drives beautifully." Aurora looked at the car, then at the man. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She felt light. She felt dangerous. "You know," she said, a playful smile curving her lips as she gripped the key. "I used to think you were just another arrogant billionaire who needed a reality check." "And now?" Julian asked, arching an eyebrow. Aurora walked to the driver's side of the Aston Martin. She opened the door, the scent of new leather hitting her. She looked back at him over the sleek roof of the car. "Now?" she said, her eyes sparkling. "I think you're a high-risk investment that's about to pay off." Julian threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, carefree sound that made passers-by turn and look. "I'll take those odds. Drive fast, Miss Rostova. The world is waiting for us." Aurora slid into the driver's seat and pushed the start button. The engine roared to life with a ferocious growl, vibrating through the steering wheel and into her hands. As she shifted into gear, with the billionaire in the passenger seat and her old life in the rearview mirror, Aurora realized something. She hadn't just warned a millionaire. She had become the one in the driver's seat. And that, my friends, is how the tables turn. Aurora went from serving the wine to owning the building, all because she had the courage to speak the truth when it mattered most. It's a reminder that true loyalty is rare, and when you find it, whether it's in a friend, a partner, or an employee, you hold on to it and you reward it. If you loved seeing Gustave get what he deserved and Aurora driving off in that Aston Martin, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm share these stories with more people. And if you want more dramas about karma, billionaires, and hidden secrets, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I want to know, what was your favorite part? The boardroom showdown or the restaurant firing? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video.